Today on the show, why Melbourne's public transport system is the worst in the world, Falls Festival has been cancelled, a brand new Legend of Zelda game, and are AI voice covers the future of music? All that and more on 20th Century Boy, the 7th most popular comedy podcast in the Solomon Islands. Welcome to 20th Century Boy. My name is Mike Neighbor Totoro, and this is the inside of my mind. Welcome to the show. Radio Mike, of course, is my real name, but each week I start the show with another Mike-themed name. This week, Mike Neighbor Totoro. I think it's more Totoro, but it's the Japanese Studio Ghibli movie about the big, weird cat thing. It's alright, I think it's overrated personally, but if you can help me out with these, because they get harder. They do get harder each week to come up with. You know, I've done Mike Big Fat Greek Wedding. I've done Mike Sharona. Shout out to my neighbor, Steve, who was listening to the podcast and said to me in the lift, hey, I was listening to your podcast. I've got a new name for you on your podcast. Do Mike Sharona. And I was like, dude, I've done it. Thank you for the suggestion, but I've done it. And I'm running out of them, man. I'm really running out of them. So yeah, Mike Sharona. I don't know. I've done Mike Chemical Romance. You know, any pun on Mike or Radio Mike or any RM themed name, please send in. Of course, at the top there, I did mention 7th most popular podcast in the Solomon Islands. We have charted, baby, and we are number 7. Sorry, it was actually misleading. We're the 7th ranked comedy podcast in the Solomon Islands, which is interesting. I don't know where we sit on the charts in Australia. Definitely not in the top 100, but somehow in the Solomon Islands we are 7th. So shout out to all our Solomon Islands listeners, who I assume are listening now, and there must be a lot of you, but I don't know anyone from the if you're from the Solomon Islands and you listen, please email in. I wonder if it's actually a mistake. Like, because where is the Solomon Islands? The Solomon Islands are like north of Australia, right? My cousin, funnily enough, actually, this is so funny. My cousin Paul recently did a work trip in the Solomon Islands. He's an engineer, and he had to do a bunch of work over there. Maybe without telling me, he was like, I'm going to get the numbers up for Mike's pod in the Solomon Islands. Maybe he did it, because he's the only person I know who has been to the Solomon Islands or has anything to do with it. Like, I'm just checking on the map here. Yeah, so the Solomon Islands are like, yeah, you know, near Papua New Guinea, northeast of Brisbane, basically. Maybe it's just like the proximity isn't right and people in Queensland are getting categorized as Solomon Islands, but I don't know. Anyway, if you're from the Solomon Islands, write in next week. We'd love to hear from you. Lot to do on the show today. I wanted to do another shout out to Radio Chris Prowse. Welcome to the radio family. Of course, over the years since I started this podcast 4.5 years ago, I guess my profile has slightly raised, I guess you could say. You know, I'm definitely not famous or anything, but some people do know me. Often I get recognized for my voice. And in fact, my neighbor Steve, who I just mentioned before, he heard my voice on the news story that I was a part of a few weeks ago, and he was like, oh, I recognize your voice, and then I Googled you and found out about your podcast and stuff. Lots of people recognize my voice, and I guess what I've realized is a lot of people know who I am and know what I look like, but I'm not interesting enough to people for them to actually want to stop me and say hello to me and talk to me. That's what I've realized. Because last night, at the time of recording, I was catching up with my friend Carl for dinner, and I was standing in the city. He works at 3AW, a radio station here in Melbourne, and I was standing, it's opposite Southern Cross Station. I was standing at Southern Cross, and a guy walked past me, and he just looked at me, really tall guy as well. Didn't look like someone who would know who I was. And he just goes, oh, Mike, Radio Mike. dude, this is crazy. And I was like, oh, hey, man. And then he took out his phone and showed me, he's like, hey, this is so crazy, but can I take a photo with you? Because me and my friends have a group chat called Radio Mike in the Wild Sightings. He's like, I live round the corner from you, and so do a bunch of my friends, and we all see you in Richmond all the time, and we take photos of you from afar and send it in this group chat. And he shows me this group chat. Sure enough, it's called Radio Mike in the Wild. And he's like scrolling, and there's just random photos of me from like across the road in Richmond around where I live. And I was like, dude, what the hell? So I took a photo of it. It's really funny. But yeah, Radio Mike in the Wild. Let's start that. If you do see me, don't come up to me. No, dude, I like when people come up to me. But I posted in the Discord, and feel free to join the Discord. It's a great community of listeners of this show, and there's lots of discussion channels about lots of stuff. A guy emailed the show, and the Hamish and Andy show. And because I read a lot of the emails for Hamish and Andy, I just read it. And I wanted to read it out. I can't remember this guy's name. I think it's Pete. But he said, hey guys, this is to Hamish and Andy. I'm hoping to garner your support to introduce a monetary reward for podcasters who spot Radio Mike out in the wild. This is a different guy to Chris. I think Mike has recently moved into my area near IKEA in Richmond. Yes, I mean, not recently. I've been here for nearly a year. And we seem to be on very similar schedules. I'm constantly seeing him out at the shops, at local cafes, on the tram, just walking down the street everywhere. And that does sound a lot like me. With this current rental and financial crisis, I would welcome an opportunity to monetize these sightings and to share around some of Mike's big radio money. Thanks in advance. Yeah, sadly, the big radio money definitely is not true. But happy to chat to anyone who sees me and actually wants to say hello to me instead of just taking a photo of me from across the road. But wanted to shout out those people because yeah, it is really weird because I guess what it means is because sometimes I walk past people and they kind of just like give like a knowing smile at me and like nod, and I'm like, I don't know, that was weird. And I guess it's because they know who I am, but they're not interested in like. I'm not interesting enough. Like, if you saw Hamish Blake on the street, if you saw Andy, if you saw, I don't know, I'm trying to think like other Australian celebrities, like, big famous people, you'd like want to stop them and get a photo with them and talk to them, post it on your Instagram. But me, I'm just like this guy who knows a lot of people and people know me from that. And because of that, like they know me, but they're not interested in me enough to stop me. And I guess... yeah, it's like whenever I'm like on the tram or in a shop, there could be people in there being like, oh, that's Mike, like watching me and how I behave. And I feel like I need to have a bit of a reckoning with that. Got to always be on my best behavior, no matter where I am. But anyway, it's all a work in progress. Wanted to do a quick one of these. All the write-ins that you sent in. This is all the write-ins where I read out some of the stuff you guys have sent in, basically glorified mailbag. And I did want to say, at the moment, where I'm super busy every week, where we're in every week doing the Hamish and Andy pod, and next week I'm actually in Sydney because we are doing the Remembering Project. I'm back up in Sydney for a couple of days to record the next season of Hamish and Andy's Remembering Project, which is always fun, even though long-term listeners of the show, you will know that I hate Sydney. It's the worst city in the world, and I would never go there voluntarily, only for work. But I've been really busy. Might be some shorter episodes, still figuring out next week, but yeah, just bear that in mind. But Radio Big Bear, welcome to the RF, and of course, subscribe to me on YouTube because I put up highlight clips from this show almost every night. Radio Big Bear commented on one of the YouTube clips about the new AFL video game, and I just thought it was interesting. Hey mate, literally never watched your channel before, but great video. I'll have to agree with you here. AFL is not a global sport. To Aussies, in brackets, I lived in Australia for 4 years, it may seem like the world to them, but it's factually not that big of a sport in terms of market. NFL... American football, though bigger, is also not a global sport. That's why when Americans claimed Super Bowl is the biggest sporting event, it was absolutely stupid and showed how ignorant and egocentric Americans are. The World Cup attendances and views completely blew Super Bowl out of the water. It just seems like the biggest sporting event in the world for Americans because they live in their own little bubble.
Denver sucks ass.
Shout out to our Denver listeners. It's a similar case, but not exactly the same. Australians also live in a bubble to some extent, but are at least more self-aware. It's hard to sell AFL games. Also, in my experience, Australians are very fit, sporty, and active people and would probably just rather play the actual sport. Whereas Americans are fat, lazy, highest rate of obesity. This is getting oddly personal. So you have a ton of unfit people who love NFL as a sport, but cannot play it. So they resort to playing the video game version of it instead. Keep it up, dude, from Big Bear. Thank you very much, Big Bear, for writing that in. And yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think, well, no, I don't think many Aussies think that AFL is a huge worldwide sport, but maybe we think it's bigger than it is because we are in a bit of a bubble. And I agree with your take on the Americans as well. Of course, would love for you to support the podcast on Patreon, patreon.com/Radio Mike. Get the Pat and Mike show every Friday, which is me and producer Pat just doing a podcast, and it's really fun. Listeners on Discord are really into it. Here is a little bit from this week's set where Pat, who does a lot of work for the show, brought in some ChatGPT prompts, and we found the answers to some questions that he had asked ChatGPT.
The chosen prompt. Explain the podcast 20th Century Boy. This is what ChatGPT has cooked up.
Okay.
20th Century Boy is a podcast hosted by Scott Rudd, an Australian podcaster and writer.
Scott Rudd?
I have no idea.
Who is Scott Rudd?
10.
My name is Scott Rudd, and this is the inside of my mind. So please go and check that out. I really want to do a hard plug here for the Patreon. Patreon.com/Radio Mike. Patreon.com/Radio Mike. Patreon.com/Radio Mike. There's heaps of good content. There is hours and hours of bonus content on there that we've collated over the years. And as always, and I try to do this just once a show, independent podcasts, all costs are mine. We don't really have sponsors. We don't have heaps and heaps. We're not a A-class, AAA podcast. We're just an indie podcast. We've got a nice following. If all of you could give $4 a month, every listener, because I see the numbers, we'd just have more than enough money to grow and do more. So, if you can, that'd be amazing. Please consider. $4 a month gets you the Pat and Mike show. $1 a month if you just want to support the show. That's $12 a year, which would be awesome. Did mention it might be a bit of a shorter show, which is okay. Sometimes they can be a bit shorter, but wanted to talk about a big piece of news in Melbourne and Australia that I am celebrating a lot. MELBOURNE'S, which is our public transport kind of card system, ticketing system, is getting a complete, what do you call it? Complete rebrand, not rebrand, oh God, how am I stuck on this? MELBOURNE'S is getting a refresh. I guess it's getting a refresh. An overhaul. It didn't have at all. Overhaul. They are overhauling the MELBOURNE'S system. Now, I would love to hear from anyone who's been a tourist in Melbourne, to hear your experiences with the MELBOURNE'S system, but I'm going to speak about it as someone who has grown up in Melbourne and has used the public transport system in Melbourne my whole life. I don't actually drive anymore. I stopped driving. I don't have a car anymore. I get public transport everywhere unless it's a short distance thing. I'll either walk or just get one of the e-scooters. And I realize, particularly living in the city, and I am lucky that I get to live in Richmond, which is very central and very connected, I just don't really have a huge need for a car. Like, it's very easy to get around without a car now. And when I had a car, I felt like I couldn't go without it. And I would just drive everywhere, like drive the most pointless sort of distances. But now it's just, I've not in the last probably 6-7 months since having a car have I been like, oh, I wish I had a car. Maybe there's been one time where I've had a work thing and I've had to go to my dad, hey, can I borrow your car? Because there's no solution to this. But anyway, I'm using the public transport a lot now, but I also used it a lot when I was a kid, when I was going to school, when I didn't have my license as a teenager. I would get on trams, trains, buses. Here's the thing about MELBOURNE'S, and I'm not going to hold back, so get prepared if you work for the MELBOURNE'S company. Myki is the worst public transport system in the world. I would hedge a bet on that. It is the worst ticketing system in the world. Myki, the worst ticketing system in the world. So bad in every way. And before Myki here in Melbourne, and just to explain Myki, it's basically, well, it's hard to explain without getting into the issues. Basically, it's a plastic card. The front says Myki. The back has like a barcode. There's no other information that you can see on the card, really. And you tap it on when you get on the train. It like says touched on, and then you touch off when you get off the train, which is also stupid. But anyway. Before Myki, when I was a kid, it was just called Met Card. And you had like a paper, it was just a paper printed card that you put into the machine. It validates the card. And it was like, it just covered everything. You could basically just say, I used to go 2-hour trip, concession, because I was at school, zone 1. They had zone 1 and zone 2. Zone 1 was basically like inner city. Zone 2 was outer city. Let's go 2-hour card, concession, zone 1. When I was a kid, it was like $2. Mum would give me $2 every day, and I'd go and get my ticket after school. So easy. It's like, I'm going to be on, you were either a 2-hour trip or a daily fare, right? Then they brought in Myki. They got rid of Metcard, which I thought was a much better system. Myki, this plastic card, the card itself costs you $6, and then you have to top up your Myki. And it has just been a piece of shit for this. Like, there are so many problems with it. First of all, you can't, for the longest amount of time, you couldn't see how much money was on your Myki when you were not at a tram, basically. Like when you were not at a station. Like you had to touch onto like some machine that goes, you have $5 on your card. So you would go and top it up, and then you couldn't tell how much was left. So what would happen a lot is you would leave the house and you'd be like, oh, I assume there's money on my Myki. You'd walk to the stop, you'd try to get on the tram, and it'd be like, no, you have no money on your Myki. And for the longest time as well, I think it's changed now, but for the longest time, you couldn't top it up on the go. So then what you had to do was find the nearest place, like a news agency or something like that you could top it up, walk there, top it up, and then walk back to the stop. Especially if you were a tram and bus user like me. Like train stations, a lot of them have a machine where you can top up, but tram and train users, no sir. And it was just such a fuck around. Like, it's just like, you're like, I assume there's money on my card. Bam, there's no money on my card. Okay, I'll get off this tram, walk to the nearest thing, blah, blah, blah. Such bullshit. Just the worst system in the world. I have never understood how it works. I've never understood if you have to touch off after every trip or just after like train trips. I don't understand it. It has been the biggest thorn in my side for so long, and I'm so glad that it is going. It was just it's the worst system. It doesn't now. It works on Android phones now, but it doesn't work on iPhones. So you can't touch on with your phone, can't touch on with your credit card. Like, we're so behind the rest of the world on this stuff. What else is bad about Myki? Like, I don't know. I just remember, like, then when internet came in on phones, like, this is how far back we're going. You could log into, like, you could go on the Myki website, log in. It wasn't an app or designed for mobile, but this would be the only way you could top up if there was nowhere around, right? Like, if you would think if you got on a tram and saw that you had no money, there would just be an easy way for you to be like, oh, I have no money. I'll just log on to the app and put $5 on, and then I'm sweet. Because you could do that on a bus. And I think maybe the problems are because I was mainly a tram user during school. When I was at uni, I used to take the bus to uni, and if you got on, there was no money, you could just go to the bus driver, oh, can you put $5 on this? You hand him cash, he puts it on, right? Perfect system. That's how it should be. Well, like, no, it shouldn't be like, but it should at least be like that. Trams, touch on, you could log in to the website designed for like monitors, log in, and then you could connect all your details and put the card in, and then be like, it'll take 48 hours for the money to appear on your card. What? Why? And then you just have to get off the tram. Like, you didn't have any choice. It was bullshit. So then, like, what I ended up starting to do after a while was I would just, if that happened, I would just stand on the tram right next to the door, check if any ticket inspectors were coming on, and if the ticket inspectors were at the next stop, I'd just get off the stop and run away. Like that, it just became easier and more efficient with my time to risk it than to actually pay the fare. Also, you can sometimes just forget to touch on. And then I remember once I got this fine because I literally just forgot to touch on, even though like you could see my record that I touch on every day. And then this day I just forgot to touch on. And like I went to the guy was like, oh, we're going to have to give you a fine. I'm like, oh, like there's money in the card. I'll just touch on now. It's like, no, but you didn't touch on. It's like, yeah, but like there's money on my card. I just forgot. Like you can see in my record that I've touched on every day for the past 6 weeks. I just forgot to touch on. So I'm just going to touch on now. And now I have a valid ticket. And I still have a valid ticket. I just didn't touch on. It's just the most bullshit system in the world. So ridiculous. There was no way to check your balance. I hated it. So now what they're doing is and they're not even rolling it out till like 2025 and beyond. But it's going to be like modern. I mean, I assume whatever company it is going to fuck it up because they fucked up Myki. I remember when Myki came out, they were like, it's revolutionary. It's so good. We've invested all this money in the technology, and it was just such a fuck around when it came out. No one got it. But what they're going to do is it can be all card and phone based. There's no longer any third party card you need. It's just, and this is how it should be in modern days. Okay, it costs you $4 to get here. Tap my card, take my $4, I get off on the other side, and I've paid my fare. That's all it needs to be. It does not need to be more complicated than that with cards and topping up and all this shit. And then the other thing about Myki was the cards expired. Like you would just, like a piece of plastic just expired, and then you'd have money on the card that you can't use anymore. And then you had to take it to Myki to transfer onto a new card, but you had to pay $6 for a new card anyway. It was just ludicrous. I remember in Japan, and this is my only overseas experience, but the ticketing system there is so good. Like, it just, basically it's like, okay, you're here, you're at Shinjuku Station in Tokyo, you want to go to Shibuya Station, that's 2 stations away, it just says on a board, you're here, if you're going here, you have to pay 200 yen. That's like $2. You're here, you're going here, pay us 200 yen. You put in 200 yen, it spits out a ticket. You get off at the other side, you put your ticket in, you're done. You get out of here, right? Then if you accidentally get off at the wrong stop, so you haven't paid the full fare, like say it's like, well, here to here is 300 yen, you've gone too far, right? I feel like in Australia, if you did that, they'd write you up a ticket for it. Like, nope, you haven't paid for the right ticket, sorry. But here in Japan, you just go, oh, sorry, I didn't pay. And they go, oh, that's cool. You just need to pay another 100 yen. And you go, okay, here you go. And then like, cool, see ya. Like they just fix it up for you straight away. It's like, pay the fare, you go. It's so efficient there. It's just, I remember like, I used to keep all the ticket stubs when I was in Tokyo just because I thought it was fun to hold on to them all. Like I'd keep them all in my pocket. But then one day I accidentally gave the wrong stub to the guy. And he was like, what? He said something in Japanese. He just looked so confused. And he was like, oh, like, because I had given him a ticket that said I was going to a train station that was like on the complete other end of town. Like it was basically like if I was in East Malvern here in Melbourne for Melbourne people, and I handed him a ticket that said I was getting off at Craigieburn. And he's like, what? You're in Craigieburn? How did you get this ticket? That's not even on this line. Basically, that was it. Myki, I'm glad to hear you go. And also, you know, as a Mike and a Myki, it really put our name to shame. Myki really did do a number on Mykis around the world. And, you know, I'm pretty disappointed in that. I noticed today on the news that Falls Festival has been cancelled this year. Which I thought it was interesting, and I wanted to talk about like the festival scene in Melbourne, sort of as I remember it growing up. Falls Festival has always been one of the biggest New Year's festival. It's like a 3-day event, and you know, camping festival, really big acts, and you know, ever since I was at high school, people were always like, "Oh, we've got to go to Falls Festival," and it did kind of become sort of the place. I've never been to it, but I'm not a big festival guy, especially camping festivals, because I hate camping. But it kind of became the sort of festival that like people that went to like schools like mine, like private schools, you you know, they finish and then they all kind of go to these festivals together over New Year's and think they're awesome. And they're like, yeah, Falls Festival, man. And like, it ends up being filled up with like 18-year-olds going to their first festival. Like, that's the kind of vibe. And I feel like the festival circuit in Australia has changed so much over the years. I'm not a huge festival person because often I find they become more about like the logistics of where you need to be and when to see the acts you want to see. And like, oh, I've got to be here at this time and then I've got to move to here. Like, rather than just enjoying the music, like you're always thinking about where you have to be next. And you always do have to be somewhere next to see the bands that you want to see. But, you know, over the years, there's been so many festivals in Melbourne that just do not exist anymore. Soundwave, of course, one of them. Big Day Out. There was like Stereo Sonic, which was like the electronic sort of rave kind of one. The one that I went to, and it was my first ever festival, the first year out of high school, was Soundwave, 2013. And I think I've spoken about it on this show before, but it really felt like that was the first year I finished school and I had grown up listening to like pop punk, and Soundwave was a very metal, punk, hardcore kind of festival, very popular. And that year was like the year for bands I grew up loving. I saw Blink-182, I saw Linkin Park, Paramore, Offspring, Billy Talent, Sum 41, Bowling for Soup, like all those kind of bands from the 90s and 2000s that I absolutely loved. And it was such a fun time, but it was a lot of it was just like, oh, I need to go to this stage now. And then the crowd for Blink-182 was just insane. And Linkin Park, so you like, it was so far at the back you could barely see them. But luckily I went to their side shows. But Big Day Out was really big. I never went to that. That was really big and then suddenly got cancelled. I know the guy that was managing Soundwave and was like the promoter for Soundwave and the guest and the band booker. He was sort of embroiled in a lot of controversy because I think he was basically using the proceeds of the festival to fund the next year's festival, which sort of in a way was like pyramid schemey where like the money, there was no money. It was just constantly staying afloat because of the festival, but then kind of overbooked and couldn't pay the bands. And then the bands all started tweeting that like they hadn't been paid for the festival like 2 years ago when he was promoting a new festival. And then it all just went balls up and I think it just couldn't go anymore. And it did become really expensive to run festivals here as well. But Big Day Out used to have huge acts. I remember one year it was the Chili Peppers, one year it was the Killers. If you've been to any of these, if you went to any of these, let me know. I want to hear the experience. But yeah, Chili Peppers, Killers. One year Tony Hawk was there doing like skateboarding tricks in a half pipe, which I thought was really funny. I know one year at Falls they had Blur. Acts like that, like really big international acts would come. The other one I went to, I went to another New Year's one, which was Beyond the Valley. The first year they ran Beyond the Valley, and it was in Phillip Island. And I just remember it. I kind of just went because all of my friends from school were going. I didn't really want to go. I didn't know many of the acts, but I just sort of went anyway. Didn't have like a great time, and that's nothing against like my friends that were there. It just like wasn't my style, and I just was like such a different person then. But I just hate camping festivals and like sort of everything surrounding that. It's just not really my jam. The other one I went to was New Year's Eve on the Hill, like 5 or 6 years ago. And it just was not like that. Also was just not that good. There was ballpark music. That's pretty much all I remember. Like, and it just seems like so small now. Doesn't really feel like there's huge festivals anymore. In fact, and we're going to talk about it on the Pat and Mike show this week. Pat in the Discord posted the lineup for Laneway Festival, and he was like, whoa, the Laneway Festival is awesome this year. And I looked at it and I did not know a single person on the lineup except for Skrillex. And I was like, Skrillex? Like, what? How? Like, what a throwback. Skrillex. I don't know. I think the festival scene is really, really strange at the moment. There's a brand new Legend of Zelda game out. And it's called Legend of Zelda: The Tears of the Kingdom. It's the follow-up to the 2016 game Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild on Nintendo Switch, which was almost unanimously considered one of the best games ever made, revolutionary for its time, and often Zelda games are considered that. Like, they're often considered incredible games. The new one, Tears of the Kingdom, has gotten similar acclaim, people really liking it. I played a little bit of it at my brother's yesterday, and controversial hot take, and I think I have spoken about this on the podcast before, but Legend of Zelda games just aren't really my jam. They're just not really the kind of game that I like to play. And I was playing it at my brother's and I was like, he was like, how cool is this? And I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know if I would want to buy this. And I don't think it's a bad game. It's just not my kind of game. Funnily enough, I've recently been, I'm really into PS5 at the moment. I've got the PlayStation 5 Deluxe sort of online service where there's a bunch of free games. There's like hundreds of free games, and every month they give you more and more free games. So I haven't bought a game in a long time. I just download games, and if I like one, I just play it. And got addicted to this game on PlayStation called Monster Boy, which is like this, they call them Metroidvania games, which is basically like the kind of game where there's a big sort of interconnected 2D world, and you kind of walk through it exploring, and then there's certain barriers that you can't get through until you've like beaten a boss and gotten a new ability. And every time you get a new ability, you can explore the world a little bit easier and find new secrets and new directions and new worlds and stuff. So this Monster Boy, and got addicted to it. Couldn't even like do work. I was just like addicted to this game. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was really fun. It was a really good game. And it's just like 2D platforming, very simple, but very, very fun. And stayed up the other night till about 1:30 a.m. just trying to 100% it, get the platinum trophy. If you have a PlayStation, you get me. So addictive. And that's what I want from a game. When I play a game, I want a fast-paced game, not like, even my brother was saying Zelda is a very like slow game. Like, it's like you just immerse yourself in it and you're just in awe of the world. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to immerse myself. I just want a game that I can pick up and play. I don't have to explore. I hate exploring. Do I? No, I don't even know. I think my struggle with games, like I've talked about it before, they're just too big. They ask too much of you. You have to learn too much. You have to invest too much. But then I guess I'm investing hours and hours of my life playing this Monster Boy game. But yeah, Zelda. I mean, once again, the ones I have played, like, I've enjoyed, but I've never been like, this is an incredible game. Like, an absolutely incredible game. And again, I have never played The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I've never played it, never beaten it, don't know much about it. Maybe, and I think I might be doing a repeat of a segment I did like 3 years ago on the pod. But maybe I got to play it. I think it's available on Switch now. I think you can just play it on Switch. Maybe I've just got to play Ocarina of Time and just be like, yep, I'm playing it. Maybe that's a challenge for the show. I don't know. But yeah, Tears of the Kingdom. Curious about like what people think of it and whether people are enjoying it and playing it. I assume a lot of people are because it's really good. The final thing I wanted to talk about is, and we've touched a little bit on this over this year on the show, but the rise of AI, because it does continue to rise and rise and rise. And there's a new kind of branch of AI that I am really, really enjoying and that I think is very interesting. I think it's all interesting. I think the way that our world adapts to AI is going to be increasingly interesting. But this in particular is really interesting to me because I think, basically there's this new trend called AI covers, where essentially people are creating AI voices of singers and then getting them to sing songs that they never sung. For example, just to demonstrate, Freddie Mercury, and a lot of them are Freddie Mercury or Kanye West based. Maybe they're just very popular. But also, I guess it's based on how much data there is of these people. But this is Freddie Mercury singing Michael Jackson's Thriller.
You're paralyzed, 'cause this is Dylan. Dylan night, and no one's gonna save you from the beat of the strike. You know it's Dylan.
I think it's so cool, and I think it's just like, it's gonna make a lot of, there's so many that come to mind. Like, I would love to hear, I don't know, Freddie Mercury singing a Blink-182 song, or Michael if these keep happening, I think you could just make basically we're just moving to this point with AI where anyone's fantasy can become a reality. And it's weird, but also cool, but also creepy. Again, like I said, there's a lot of Freddie Mercury ones. And Freddie's such an accomplished singer, such a fantastic voice, such a great vocal range. So he's a great sort of example of this technology in action. Here's him on the Black Parade.
Because one day I'll leave you a phantom to lead you in the summer to join the Black Parade.
And I think that song, The Black Parade, is so inspired by Queen that it almost just feels natural to hear him singing it, even with Thriller.
You're paralyzed.
Like, that is Freddie, but his voice almost fits that song so well, which is what's so interesting about it. Here's him singing Yesterday by the Beatles, which I actually think, one, that song is one of the greatest songs ever written, but two, it sounds beautiful, just as beautiful with Freddie.
Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday.
But just imagine you can get your favorite artist to sing any song. You can get your favorite artist to sing your favorite song by another artist. And just all of these remixes. And then, like, suddenly we're at a point commercially where it's like, is there interest in, like, the estate of Freddie Mercury to do an album of AI Freddie Mercury covers? Because it would generate interest and it would generate money. Like, hey, this is an AI Freddie Mercury voice and we're just going to churn out albums of him doing other people's songs that he can never do, but can we still make money off his voice in this way? And I guarantee you this will happen. You will see, like, Freddie does Disney. Like, they'll turn him into a commodity and it'll be like, Freddie does Disney, Freddie does Green Day's American Idiot, Freddie Mercury does The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance, album in full. The Freddie Mercury does the Beatles' Let It Be. Like, they'll do that and people will listen to it because it's actually kind of fascinating to hear. This is Freddie doing Oasis's Don't Look Back in Anger. Again, it's beautiful.
So Sally can wait. She knows it's too late as I'm walking on by. And my soul slides away. But on my back in anger, I heard you say.
And what are the implications of this as well? Because also, if they can sort of AI clone Beyonce's voice, can Beyonce kind of be like, hey, I don't want to do music, I don't want to record anymore, I've lost my voice, for instance, just make albums using an AI voice of me. I'll give it as much information as it needs to be as close to perfect as possible. And you can hear it's not perfect yet, but does she just go, just do it and keep generating music using my voice? And in the future, I think we will have completely AI generated bands. And that's kind of that's kind of the next step for something like Gorillaz. I've talked about Gorillaz before. They're not a real band. It's Damon Albarn from Blur. But they're all these characters that they use in the marketing and it's supposed to be these characters, right? I think the next step for that kind of thing that removes celebrity from music is AI bands. Just make a new Gorillaz that's just all AI. You can do music videos, you can do fake interviews, like you can create stories out of AI bands if it gets to that point, and create a whole album of AI songs. It feels really incredible. And then, I don't know, just young artists coming up as well. I saw this interview on TikTok with Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins. That was him, and I wish I had the audio, but I don't know if I'll find it. But he was basically saying, like, he's like, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I spent hours and hours and hours in my bedroom practicing the guitar and learning how to write songs and writing songs. Hours. But no one is going to do that in the future if they can just get AI to generate music for them. It's just no one's going to even know how to play instruments, because no one who's writing music will put the time into actually writing it. They'll just generate something and work off that. And I think that is really interesting, and it's not necessarily bad, depending on how you look at it, but it's also going to just increase saturation, increase everything in this market. The same way, like, I talked about those fake Joe Rogan podcasts, where some people are making Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson talk about Sonic the Hedgehog in really convincing conversations. Like, you know, I wonder if there could be a hoax where someone goes, hey, leaked audio has been discovered before Freddie Mercury died. He did a session at a studio where he recorded Yesterday by the Beatles. It's never been released. Here it is.
Yesterday.
You know, just someone is going to hoax it, and it's going to be difficult for us to tell after a while. A few more highlights of this. Loved this one of Kurt Cobain and Kendrick Lamar doing Linkin Park's In the End.
Kept everything inside, and even though I tried, it all fell apart. What it meant to me will eventually be a memory of a time when I tried so hard and got so far. In the end, it wouldn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. In the end,
And as I said, there are a lot of Kanye West ones out there. And what I've realized is, like, Kanye actually does have a really unique, interesting, lovely singing voice. And he's, you know, obviously a great musician, but here's a great one that I enjoyed from Kanye.
Cause I'm Slim Shady, yes, I'm the real Shady. All you other Slim Shadys are just imitating. So won't the real Slim Shady please stand up? Please stand up. Please stand up. Will Smith don't got a cuss in his
Like,
rap.
that sounds pretty authentic. This one as well.
Hey there, Delilah, what's it like in New York City? I'm 1,000 miles away, but tonight you look so pretty, yes you do. Times Square can't shine as bright as you. I swear it's...
Why is that better than the original? The original's a lovely song, but Kanye West singing it just does something completely different. Of course, I had to check if there were any of these kinds of ones with Kanye.
Hello there, the angel from my nightmare, the shadow in the background of the morgue, the unsuspecting victim of darkness.
I just think it's incredible. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's YouTube playlists of, like, compilation of Kanye West AI covers of sad emo songs, and you just get, you know, sad boy Kanye singing Hey There,
Hey
Delilah.
there, Delilah, what's...
I love it. And finally, just because I thought this one was really funny, because it's not just artist swaps. You can actually get anyone, any character to sing a song.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom.
Funnily enough, with The Simpsons, like, you got to think as well, because I've talked on the show before about how theoretically I think The Simpsons could go forever. The power of that IP is just so strong, and when the cast dies, they probably would just recast the characters, which to us seems so weird, but, you know, they've recasted all iconic characters. Bugs Bunny, Mickey Mouse, like, they were iconic characters then. They're not, like, they're still iconic, but they're not as relevant culturally now. But all characters just get recasted eventually, and they sound different. But Homer now sounds different to how he sounded in the 90s. That's the same voice actor. But now I'm even thinking, could they just AI voice them? You know, pay a massive licensing fee to have Dan Castellaneta's voice AI made and just use that for the rest of eternity to be Homer and pay his estate, I don't know, like $1 trillion a year or something to use it for the rest of eternity. Like, it is opening up so many interesting avenues for like money, for licensing, for like, you know, in the past, like, say Mark Hamill, aka Luke Skywalker, was dead. In the past, if they wanted to use Luke Skywalker again, they'd just have to recast someone who kind of looks like him. But now, like, with AI going the way it's going, even when Mark Hamill dies, and there's more ethics involved in this, but even if he died, they could still use his image and AI recreate him. And they've kind of done that without, like, they did that with, like, with Princess Leia. Like, they've used sort of AI recreations of characters in the Star Wars franchise. And, like, I'm sure Disney wants to do this so they can keep their legacy characters alive. And then you're not even watching true live action. You're technically watching animation. I don't know. I just find it very fascinating, and I really want to see how these AI covers continue to evolve. But let's do this. The plug! Harry Potter and the Boys came back. Chapter 1 of Book 3, Harry Potter and the Dementors from Azkaban. It's back. Sam is back. Had a blast doing it. We're recording tomorrow for the next step, and I'm really grateful. You can also I do a Patreon bonus for that show on patreon.com/Harry Potter and the Boys. It's called The Sorting Ceremony, where we sort famous people into Hogwarts houses. That's a lot of fun. I've been enjoying that a fair bit. And thanks to everyone who's jumped on that Patreon to support. But yeah, again, patreon.com/Radio Mike for this stuff. YouTube channel, the Instagram at TCBpod, and mine at radio.mike. As well as that, I'm on the Hamish and Andy podcast this week, as well as 2 Guys, 1 Cup, talking my big year of footy, if you want to go and listen to those as well. And I think I might be on an episode of Fofop with Charlie Clausen this week. So I'll try and publish that on my Instagram stories if I am. I'm not sure. We recorded it last week, but I think they're getting a bit ahead. That's pretty much it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, guys. And can't wait to catch you next week. Next week might be a bit shorter because I'm going to be in Sydney, so I need to figure out when and where I'm going to record. But aside from that, thanks so much for listening. My name's been Radio Mike, and this has been The Inside of My Mind. See you later.